think we should be set to go. All right. So this is what this tile looks like, and we just all looked at that one large chunk I made in Adobe Illustrator together. And of course, once we cut it up into sprites, you see how each section becomes like a little piece like this in the middle, right? Right. We're used to kind of seeing that. Now the way it works in a rule tile is one of these. Just have to find the right one here. Oh, let me go to my tile map. Okay, here. This tile map has all these pieces, and we talked about this a little bit. They've got all these rules, right? So the reason like you can't have this middle section attached to the upper left, for instance, is this needs to be able to stretch and duplicate as many times as it needs for the top. So if it's attached to this, it would be duplicating both. Doesn't really work, but the way this works is once we have it all set up, we can go to this tile map here, and I can click on this whole little series here, and it will be as big as I need it to. Let's hold on. Okay, oh, here's a problem. I need to click on just this one little title that represents this. This is that issue I was having before where it was doing the weird thing. So now, okay, see how it's one integrated unit and it's making that roll wherever it needs to. Now, one thing I do not have yet is these interiors. See how right here there's not an interior one? We have the outside corners, but not inside corners. So we'll add those. But see how these are repeating that bottom line wherever it needs it, and it's putting the corners right where it needs to. That's why they need to be separated like that. So you need to have at least one middle tile, the corners, the just straight left to right, top and bottom without corners, and then the middle. But what I'll do next is I will go into Illustrator here and I will add those interior corners. So far I have this. We can see that what I did was if you go to the ruler here, you could drag out a guide like that. And these blue lines are invisible, right? So they're not going to affect the actual art. But I'm using that so that I can see what they look like for each pixel amount. Now on mine it's 32 by 32 pixels, right? So I just kind of made something that was, or no, I did 50 by 50. So I made a document that's 150 by 150, right? Which is my 50 times 3 and 50 times 3, right? Or 50 times 3. So I made 150 and I just used this to divide it up so I could kind of see where things landed and just kind of made the art, right? So I'm going to do sort of the same thing here. I want to have those interior ones. So using these kind of same blocks I have here, I will go ahead and just make a little square here. Now, what I'll do actually is, because I have this like working area, I don't know if you can see this white with gray around it. This is sort of like our document size, so I'm just going to extend this a little bit. Now, obviously, if you're using something like Piskel, it will work a little differently, which is fine. All right. So what I'm really looking at, since each of my squares should be 50, I'm looking at 50 times 4 is about 200, right? So I can see on my document here, I can actually go in and type in the width if I want, like 200 pixels. If I need to. Let's see. I'm going to drag another one of these lines out here. The other way I could do it is I know that I need these every 8 grid lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Get rid of this one here. You can delete grid lines. All right, now let's see. I actually need one more because I would need 4 interior pieces. So I could just take this out another 8 units if I needed to, which would be 250 roughly. Okay, so looking at this here, I can kind of plan what I would need one of my interior units to look like. I'm just going to kind of take this whole idea I have here, this whole pattern like this. I'm just going to kind of reverse it. So I could use artwork I had here too if I want to like copy and paste it. I could and just kind of simulate it over here. So it sort of needs to work in reverse. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and then I will paste it. All right, now let's see, I would actually need this. You can right click stuff in here and do things like ungroup. I need to ungroup this a little bit because I had it grouped. So I'm just going to think about for this here what I would need. I basically just need that little square in the corner there in the upper right. So I'm going to get rid of these by dragging a selection random. Just delete, delete. I'll move this to the upper right. Actually, I'm going to undo and move it up there, and I'll just get rid of these. And then we need kind of this same look back here. So let's see, best way to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and put a square kind of like this behind this. Now I don't want this to have black lines around the edge of it, so I will go to the stroke here and I will set that to off. Okay, and then I can hit I for the eyedropper. I'm going to kind of mimic what we have in this central square maybe, but see it looks a little weird, so that's not working great. So I'm probably going to have to do some work with it here. Wait a second, something else is going on here. Okay, let's try this. About 2. So it's got this this look with it. And oh, you know why? I have the plastic wrap effect on it here. That's why. So if I get rid of that, it should look more normal. Now I'm hitting I and choosing this. Now the way I set this up, this is sort of like a freeform gradient. So I'm not going to go too much into this. It's only pertinent in Adobe Illustrator. But long story short, I've got all these gradient points I set to make these smooth colors. So I just want to kind of get rid of them here for this one. And in Adobe Illustrator, you can move stuff in front of or behind other objects. So I am using the arrange command to put this kind of behind. And I'm just editing this a little bit. Turn me with some black. Okay, this does look like it has a black line around it. Okay, there. I was going to say, even though I told it not to, so I'm just going to make sure that is gone. I'm just going to drag selection on this whole thing and hit Control G to group it. Okay, so that will be the corner piece I need. And let me just double check. I'll look at this one and make sure. It looks like it fits in there all right. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. Now, I can just rotate it for the rest of these. So, we'll go back here and I will just take this one, I will copy it and I will paste it. And I can go slightly outside here to rotate it. I'm holding shift to rotate. Pasting again. If you hold shift, remember it keeps things moving in straight lines. Copy. Paste. Holding shift as I rotate. And then I could throw in some other middle tiles here with maybe a little interest. So I'm just going to maybe make a box. Now I'm working within these blue lines I made because this is how it will be sliced up, right? So I'm telling you, there's no outline around it because these need to seamlessly flow together, so you don't want black outlines around them. Then in the middle, I'm just going to do a little editing here. And then maybe I'll duplicate one like this. Maybe I'll put like a little animal skeleton or something in it. Or if we're doing like a Spelunky type tomb one, let's put a little person skeleton in here maybe just for something fun. Okay, so I'm going to save this and export a PNG because remember we need that transparency. Because otherwise all these areas here that are white would actually show up as white and cover up other elements, so we need them to be transparent. So I'm going to go to export as PNG, and I'll name this, I'll change it to multi-tile rule just so I know, PNG with transparency. And once again, this is where you get the option if you're using Illustrator to make sure that there's transparency, so make sure you have that on. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop that into Unity here. I'll get rid of my other rule tile here so we can kind of start fresh. So I'm just going to sort of delete these ones here. Okay. So we're going scorched earth here. I'm deleting all the stuff. Now we're getting these pink tiles here because of that tile map system. Let me see if I delete my grid up here, if that gets rid of it. That did. Okay. So we're starting all fresh here. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I will go up to Game Object, 2D Object, and then Tile Map. If you already have a rectangular tile map here, you don't need to do this. And the way you can tell basically is if you see something over here that says Grid up here, that means you have a game object that holds a tile map. But in my case, I deleted everything, so let's pretend you're starting out fresh here, right? So I'll go to Game Object, 2D, and then Tile Map, and then Rectangular. You can do other types of tile maps here. You know in like Catan, that game, how they have like octagonal ones, I think, right? So your tile maps are octagonal, right? That's an option. Isometric, etc. ISO is usually used from that 3/4 kind of top, kind of side view that a lot of RPGs use, right? There's different types, but we're just doing rectangular. So notice that made this grid for me here, and it's got the tile map, and I'm going to name this tile map ground. Because remember, you can have multiple tile maps. You can have a map for the sky, a map for the foreground, a map for the background, etc. So this is just going to be my basic ground one. So now I have this. Now the next thing I need to make is a tile palette for that holds all the stuff, right? So now that I have this grid and I put a ground tile map on it, I went over here to where it said tile map and clicked open to see a tile palette. The other way you could get to tile palette here is if you go up to window, and I believe it's in here. I know it's around here somewhere. I'll have to get back to you on that. But here you can also click this open tile palette. That should be down the bottom. So that gives you this, and you can move this around. Now, tile palette shows the ground one we just made, right? Because we made this grid and this organizational system for these tiles specifically for grounds. So once again, you can have multiples for like the ones closest to you in the foreground, some for the background, etc. Now, we don't have an actual palette here yet, so it knows we're working on the ground, but we can have multiple different palettes. So the next thing I need to do is just tell it what palette, and if we don't have one, we're going to create a new one. So you can think about these palettes as being organizational units that hold things like your foreground palettes, certain ground palettes. Maybe you want one for grass, one for sky, etc. I'm going to make a new palette here, and I'll name this ground. And the rest of this I'm not going to change. Hit create. Okay, and it's going to want me to, this is where you can make a folder for it. So I recommend right clicking in here and say new folder and something like tile map. It gives you a good place to store this stuff. And then you can choose this one to be where we're putting all this tile stuff. And I'll hit select folder. Okay. Notice down here, see how in Sprice, see how it actually made that tile map folder when I did that here? So this is an actual folder in the file system now in Windows, right? Okay, so I'm in tile maps. So now I have my ground system and I have the ground palette. Okay, so what I need to do next is get my artwork in here so I can start putting in the palettes. So, I'm not sure what the soft delete thing's about, but we'll come back to that. In tile maps here, because once again I don't want to clutter up my main folder with all these tile maps and sprites, right? So in tile maps folder here, I'm going to go ahead and I'll find those one way or another. Probably the easiest way is just to go to your file folder and find your recent stuff. If you go to home, for instance, you can usually see it in the recents right up here. So here, mine's right here. I'm going to drag this into this main area here. Okay, I've got this. Now, we've been over this part a few times, so hopefully it makes sense, but I need to know how big each of these are. I'm just going to double check in Illustrator. I believe these are 50 by 50, and I will make sure of that. Yeah, 50 by 50. Close enough, at least. See up here in Illustrator, I clicked on one of these little boxes. I can see it's about 50 by 50, right? Close enough. And if you're working Piskel, you know how you can pretty easily see this 50 by 50 or 32 by 32, whatever you need. Okay. So That's how we're going to cut it up. We just need to know that. So I'm going to click on this guy down here, this multiple tile thing. And while this is selected, we're going to see in the upper right in inspector here that we have these options. And we've looked at these before, these inspector options for that tile. So I know that the size for each one is 50. So that's the size I put there. But if you're doing 32, you would put 32 there. If you're doing 64, you would put 64 there. That's the pixels per unit. And so you know how in the grid we have one unit, like one tall, one wide? We need that to correspond to the pixel size of what one block would be from our sprites. Now I need to change this to multiple as well. Because if I had just one single block that was like 50 by 50, that'd be fine, right? But I have multiples here. So I'm going to change this to multiple. So I've got multiple, I've got my size. For me it's 50, for all of you it could be 32, 64, or whatever. And then, oh, one other thing we haven't changed before that we should probably think about. I was going to come back to this, but why don't we talk about it now? We have things like quality and filter mode and stuff down here. So, let's see. This has to do with wrapping, which we don't need for now. Okay, this point no filter here, this has to do with the quality. So depending on where you want the quality at, if you're doing pixel stuff and you want to take up less room and stuff, you might want to check these. But a lot of times they recommend doing point no filter on this. Once again, this isn't going to make your stuff not work right now, but it is a filter option for your asset sprites. So it will kind of affect how they look. Just be aware that this is here, because now if you go through and make stuff, you know to go here to change it if you have a problem with that. You might want to just save yourself some time and hit point no filter right now. So this is in the filter mode pull down here. So these are the main things. The most important stuff is multiple, and set your PP or pixels per unit to be the size of each sprite, not the overall sprite. Like mine's 150 by 250, right? But individuals, 50 by 50, 50 by 50, etc. Now once this is set multiple and 50, I need to go down here to the sprite editor button right here. And we click that. That is going to bring up this thing. If you see apply, go ahead and hit apply. This will bring up this thing here where we cut it. Now up here in slice, there's several ways we could do this. It's on automatic, but I'm going to change that to grid by cell size or grid by cell count. Either of these would work. So I could say that I have 1, 2, and if you look in Illustrator here, it's easy to see. Looking at these blue lines I made, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and 1, 2, 3 rows, right? It could cut it up by that, the amount of rows and columns. Or I could tell it that we're just doing everything by pixel size too. So I could go to automatic and instead change that to either cell size or cell count. Let's do cell size, and I'll say this is 50 by 50. Now see, that's way off though. Let me figure out why it's wanting to do that. The other thing I could do is grid by cell count. See, grid by cell count should work, but here's the problem. It's going to throw things off because these aren't 50 by 50, right? So let's see. What was that, 6? Oh, you know what it is? It's all this extra room around it. So I mentioned this in the video with Illustrator. It's a little problematic because even though my document ends here where this gray starts, if it senses anything going off the document, even invisible objects, it's actually trying to make the document bigger, right? So my document ends where this gray is, see that? But notice that when I look at it in here, see how it's got all this extra room, all this invisible stuff out here? And that's because of one of the effects that was used on this. So it's a little problematic. What that means is I either need to manually cut off this extra stuff around the outside, or in Illustrator, I can basically force it to ignore the extra stuff. If I go back and do export as PNG, I'm going to replace it. Okay, here's where that problem lies. Let's see. Somewhere in here there's a way to tell it to ignore that back stuff. Let me see if I can save as. Oh, here's where it is. Okay, so the first thing I get to, see where it says use artboards? In Adobe Illustrator, if this is not clicked, it's not going to use my artboard, this copy where the gray is. It's going to use where the objects go, and it's sensing something invisible out here. It's making the document too large. So here where I name it, I actually have to click use artboards. That will solve that particular issue. Now you probably won't run into this yourself, but if you do, it's very confusing about why, even though there's nothing that you can see there, it's making things weird. So you probably won't have to deal with that, but if you do, this is how you fix it. Okay, so I'm replacing this. That means when I go back to Unity, ideally, it should sort of sense that. We can force stuff to update, like my tile right here. If I go up here to, because I just made a change to it, right? It might notice it automatically, but just in case, we can go to re-import all if we want to. So this is assets, re-import all, and this will re-import all the pictures and stuff we have in here and basically rebuild the document. So I hit yes, do it, and save. It'll act like it's shutting down for a second, then we'll come back. Now, whenever you have weird errors going on and you think it's a system, like a glitchless system, I always do re-import all at that point because it is a really good way to basically refresh your document, pull in everything, make sure you've got a fresh copy, and get rid of common errors. I'll make sure OBS is still recording, all right? Okay. We might have to re-import this one after all because it still looks weird. Let me get rid of that one. I'm going to grab that newest version I just made. Let's try dragging that in here. Okay, see how it doesn't have all that extra room around it now? I think. So I think we're good to go. So multiple 50. Skyview folks, you can go ahead and grab your phones, but keep watching if you can. We'll turn this bilinear point no filter, sprite editor, apply. Uh-oh, you know what? That did come back though. I had to mess around with this last time because something about this Illustrator file was causing some issues. So that might be a good stopping point for today for the Skyview folks. So I'll fix that and then we can get back to it tomorrow and I'll continue the recording.